First came the rumble, then the impact. An 85-foot sperm whale vengefully slammed into the Essex with a force never witnessed in maritime history. Within minutes, the ship sank in the open water of the Pacific, thousands of miles from land. The men were alone, and the fight to survive would push them to the darkest limits of human endurance. Whales meant oil, and oil meant fortune. For the men of Nantucket, hunting sperm whales wasn't just an occupation, it was a way of life. One catch could yield barrels of oil worth a small fortune, sold for lamps, lubrication, and the machinery of the age. That hunger for wealth was why the 238-ton whaleship Essex was built. She was smaller than most in the fleet, but tough, made to endure years of storms and salt. At her helm was 29-year-old George Pollard, Jr., young for a captain, but respected for his steady command. Her crew of 20 was a mix of hardened whalers and green hands, barely out of boyhood. Among them were first mate Owen Chase, second mate Matthew Joy, and 14-year-old cabin boy Thomas Nickerson, two of whom would one day put this story into words. On August 12, 1819, the Essex left Nantucket for a 2.5-year whaling voyage to the rich hunting grounds off South America's west coast. The plan was simple. The crew would first ride the westerlies toward Europe and Africa, then swing back toward South America with the northeast trade winds, and on their way, they would stop at the Azores and Cape Verde Islands to take on supplies more cheaply than back home. However, only a few days out, disaster nearly ended the voyage before it began. The Essex was knocked to her side when a sudden squall struck in the Gulf Stream. For a moment, it seemed she might not come back up because of how much the storm tore away her topgallant sail, destroyed 2 whaleboats, and badly damaged another. Captain Pollard considered turning back, but his first and second mates, Chase and Joy, urged him to press on. The crew eventually made it to Cape Verde, where they bought another whaleboat and kept moving south. 3 months later, off the coast of South America, the crew finally made their first kill, but the voyage remained a struggle, as strong westerlies fought them for more than a month. In January 1820, they were finally able to join other Nantucket whalers at St. Mary's Island, off Chile. When they got to the coastal hunting grounds, the crew's bad luck continued, as the grounds were quickly running dry. After months with little success off Chile, the Essex turned north toward Peru, and that was when they struck gold. Within 2 months, the crew had hunted enough whales to yield 450 barrels of oil, but that was just the beginning. In May, the captain of another Nantucket whaler, Aurora, told Pollard of a new offshore ground more than 1,000 miles west of Peru. These grounds were very much remote, dangerous, and of course, unspoiled. Blinded by just how much they could make, and not thinking much about the danger, in fact, they had already seen the worst when the Essex fell to its side. She and the crew decided they would go. By the time the Essex reached the distant offshore grounds, things were not as promising as the Aurora captain had said. Days dragged on, and there was not a single blow breaking the horizon. Then, on November 16th, 1820, the crew finally made their first contact. But it was not in a way that they would have guessed. Right from beneath Owen Chase's whaleboat, a whale suddenly surged up from the depths, lifting the small craft from below. Luckily, no one was thrown overboard, but the hull was damaged and in need of repair, and they were too busy trying to survive even to bother going after the whale. 4 days later, at 8 in the morning, the spell of waiting broke when the lookouts announced that they saw sprouts. In an instant, 3 whaleboats splashed into the water, each crew heading toward a pod of sperm whales. Chase's crew was the first to strike. His harpoon found its mark, but then the whale's tail swept the boat, splitting a seam wide enough to send water gushing in. The line was cut, and the whale lost. So with his boat half swamped, Chase turned back toward the Essex for repairs. 2 miles away on the windward side, Captain Pollard and First Mate Joy had better fortune, or so it seemed. Each man's boat had driven a harpoon home, the whales towing them at speed, dragging the crews far out toward the horizon and away from the mothership. Back aboard the Essex, Chase worked quickly, hammering at the damaged hull of his boat, when a crew member noticed something strange. Roughly 100 yards away, a lone sperm whale, later estimated to be 85 feet long and weighing nearly 80 tons, floated on the surface. At first, the crew thought nothing of it. Whales sometimes rested like this, but this one wasn't resting. It was watching. Without warning, the whale began swimming straight toward the Essex. Slowly at first, then faster, and all of a sudden, it dove just beneath the surface, then erupted upward, slamming into the bow with a force like a cannon blast. The ship rocked violently, and men were thrown off their feet. Before the crew could process what had happened, the whale slipped beneath the hull and vanished. Moments later, it surfaced on the far side, only a few ship lengths away, still spouting blood and foam, its massive jaw snapping open and shut. It hovered there, its head alongside the bow, tail stretching nearly to the stern. It was utterly still, as if stunned. Chase gripped his harpoon. It was an open shot, but the whale's tail lay inches from the rudder. If he did land a strike, one lash of the whale's massive fluke, the ship would lose her steering entirely. Out here, that would mean certain death. So he hesitated. For a long moment, neither man nor beast moved. Then the whale stirred. It swam several hundred yards ahead and deliberately turned to face the Essex again. This time, it came at them at twice its usual speed, and everyone on board knew that they were doomed. The second strike was catastrophic. The bow splintered, its timbers were caved in, and it tore open a gaping hole in the hull. Seawater poured in, then the whale pulled away, disappearing beneath the waves, leaving the ship to sink. Chase and the few men with him snatched whatever they could, and Steward William Bond dared to go for Pollard's sea chest. Then they scrambled into the last whaleboat as the Essex began slowly sinking. When Captain Pollard returned from the hunt in his whaleboat, the scene was pure chaos. His ship, his livelihood, was dying in the water. Pollard stared in disbelief. Chase wrote of Pollard's reaction when his boat came back. The captain's boat was the first that reached us. He stopped about a boat's length off, but had no power to utter a single syllable. He was so completely overpowered with the spectacle before him. In a short time, he was able to address the inquiry to me. "My God, Mr. Chase, what is the matter?" I answered, "We have been stoved by a whale." Within minutes, the Essex rolled onto her side and settled into the Pacific, and then the great ship was gone. For 2 days after the attack, the men clung to the shattered carcass of the Essex, scavenging whatever the ocean would give back. Barrels of food floated among the wreckage, some already ruined by seawater, others miraculously intact. By the end of the second day, 3 whaleboats had been transformed into something barely resembling a seagoing craft. Torn sails from the Essex were cut down and rigged as makeshift masts. Extra boards were bolted to the low gunnels to keep the Pacific's larger waves from pouring over the sides. In Pollard's sea chest were treasures beyond gold, 2 sets of navigational instruments and 2 complete maritime charts. Pollard and Chase each took 1 set, while Joy was left with nothing but the hope of keeping his boat within sight of the others. No one knew where they were. The nearest land was over 1,000 miles away, and it was the start of the southern summer, when storms could be merciless. The go-to option would be to sail to the nearest islands, but fear changed everything for them. The Marquesas were closer, but stories of cannibals drove them instead toward South America, a journey of nearly 4,000 miles. Herman Melville would later write that their suffering might have been avoided had they gone to Tahiti instead. The first weeks were brutal. The men rationed food and water, but even so, the supplies began to dwindle. Saltwater spray soaked the bread, making it rancid, and fresh water was consumed faster than anticipated. By December, the sun was blistering daily, and the nights were bitterly cold. The men's lips cracked and bled, their skin peeled from their faces and hands, and hunger gnawed constantly. By December 20th, a month after the attack, they reached Henderson Island. There, they found a few birds, crabs, and fresh water. But the island's resources were quickly exhausted, and after 6 days, most of them set out again. 3 men chose to remain behind, believing the island gave them their best chance of survival. Pollard assured them that if he returned to South America, he would send a rescue. The open ocean became a slow, grinding death sentence for the others. As they continued sailing, food ran out entirely. The men chewed on leather, sucked marrow from any bones they could salvage, and drank whatever rainwater they could catch. By January 10th, Joy, who had long been battling an ailment before the Essex had even left Nantucket, died quietly in his boat. His body was thrown into the sea, and another person stepped in to command Joy's boat. The next day, a sudden squall struck, and Chase's boat vanished from sight, lost to the others in the shifting rain and wind. It was the last time the crews would see each other whole. 9 days later, death came again. Richard Peterson died aboard Chase's boat, and, as with Joy, he was given to the sea. That same day, more than 100 miles to the north, Lawson Thomas perished in Joy's boat. But since there was no bread left, the men made their choice. Thomas's body was eaten. 2 days later, Charles Shorter followed him in death and into the same fate. Within days, Isaiah Shepherd and Samuel Reed were dead as well, their bodies consumed by the survivors. On January 29th, during a storm at night, Joy's boat got separated from Pollard's, and without navigational equipment of its own, it got lost, and that night was the last time they were found alive. In Pollard's boat, they faced an even crueler dilemma by February. Still adrift, with no land in sight and no food left, they decided to do the unbelievable, drawing lots to see who would die so the others might live. The lot fell to 17-year-old Owen Coffin, the captain's own cousin. He was shot, and his body was eaten. This grim cycle continued until, on February 18th, after 89 days adrift, the whaleship Indian spotted Owen Chase's boat near the coast of Chile, and tragically, there were only 3 men alive in that boat. 5 days after Owen Chase's rescue, Captain Pollard and Charles Ramsdell were found by the whaleship Dauphin near the coast of South America. The sailors who spotted them at first thought they were madmen, skeletal, sunburnt, their clothes in tatters, eyes glazed from months of horror. Of the 21 men who had sailed on the Essex, only 8 returned alive. The 3 left on Henderson Island were eventually rescued months later. The 3rd whaleboat, the one lost at sea, was found washed up on another island, carrying only 4 sun-bleached skeletons. When their story spread, it shocked the maritime world. Many refused to believe that a whale could deliberately destroy a ship. Others fixated on the survivors' grim confession that in the open Pacific, hunger had forced them to eat their dead. Later that year, Owen Chase published his account, narrative of the most extraordinary and distressing shipwreck of the whaleship Essex. It was read far and wide, including by a young Herman Melville, who would reshape the tale into the novel Moby-Dick. Pollard returned to Nantucket, but his career never recovered. After losing another ship years later, he left the sea for good. Thomas Nickerson, the young cabin boy, carried the memory for the rest of his life. writing his own account decades later, one that would remain unpublished until the 20th century. The whale's motives have never been understood. Some believe it attacked by mistake, others that it was injured and lashed out. Whatever the truth, the Essex lies somewhere at the bottom of the Pacific with her timbers rotting, and her final moments are remembered only in the words of the few who lived to tell them.